The church fell silent as James Bennett stared coldly at his bride. "I can't do this. You're too poor. This was a mistake." Gasps echoed through the cathedral as Sophia Parker stood frozen in her carefully budgeted wedding dress, humiliation washing over her face. But just as tears threatened to fall, the massive oak doors at the back of the church burst open. A distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccable suit strode confidently down the aisle, flanked by security personnel. "Hello, daughter," he announced. "It seems I'm just in time. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from." The morning of her wedding day, Sophia woke before her alarm. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of her modest one-bedroom apartment, illuminating the simple white dress hanging on her closet door. It wasn't designer. She'd found it at a sample sale, but she'd spent months searching for something that looked elegant without breaking her carefully managed budget. As she made her morning coffee, Sophia glanced at the refrigerator door covered with colorful drawings from her kindergarten students. "Miss Parker is getting married," one had written in wobbly letters above a crayon stick figure in a white triangle dress. She smiled, running her fingers over the childish artwork. Her students were like family to her, something she'd created to fill the emptiness of her own fragmented childhood. Her mother, Ellen, arrived an hour later with Sophia's best friend and maid of honor, Zoe. Ellen's eyes welled with tears as she helped her daughter into the wedding dress. "Mom, don't start crying already," Sophia laughed. "We'll never make it through the ceremony." "I can't help it," Ellen dabbed at her eyes. "I just never thought I'd see this day. You marrying into a family like the Bennetts." Sophia's smile tightened slightly. "I'm not marrying a family, Mom. I'm marrying James." Ellen nodded quickly. "Of course, honey. I just meant, it's such an opportunity. James loves me for who I am," Sophia said firmly, adjusting her simple pearl earrings, a graduation gift from her mother years ago. "My background doesn't matter to him." Zoe caught Sophia's eye in the mirror, her expression hesitant. "Has his mother finally warmed up to you?" Sophia busied herself with her veil. "Margaret Bennett is who she is. She'll come around eventually." The truth was that James's mother had barely concealed her disapproval from the moment James had introduced Sophia. "A kindergarten teacher?" she'd said with a thin smile at their first meeting. "How quaint." But James had defended her, hadn't he? He'd told his mother that Sophia's compassion and warmth were what attracted him. "Not everyone measures success by their bank account, Mother," he'd said. The memory reassured Sophia as she made her final preparations. The church James's family had selected was grand, far more elaborate than Sophia would have chosen. Stained glass windows cast colorful shadows across marble floors, and elaborate flower arrangements adorned every pew. As Sophia waited in the small antechamber, she overheard two of James's cousins walking past. "Can you believe he's actually going through with it?" one whispered. "Margaret is beside herself." "Well, you know what they say. Everybody has their rebellion. At least she's pretty, even if her dress is clearly off the rack." Sophia pressed her back against the wall, heart pounding. Zoe squeezed her hand. "Ignore them," she whispered fiercely. "They're jealous because you found love based on who you are, not what you own." The wedding march began, and Sophia took a deep breath. Her stepfather, Robert, the man who had raised her since she was 4, appeared at her side, his eyes kind behind his glasses. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked, offering his arm. She nodded, pushing away the doubts. This was her day, hers and James's. Nothing else mattered. The walk down the aisle felt longer than she'd imagined. She noticed Margaret Bennett's rigid posture in the front pew, her lips pressed into a thin line. Several of James's business associates were checking their watches or scrolling through phones. But then she saw James waiting at the altar, tall and handsome in his tailored suit, and her worries melted away. Until she reached him, something was wrong. James wasn't smiling. As she took her place beside him, she saw his jaw was tight, his eyes avoiding hers. "James," she whispered. The minister began speaking, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." James shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His mother was staring at him intently from the front row, her eyebrow raised expectantly. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then, to Sophia's horror, James cleared his throat. "I need to say something," he said, his voice carrying through the church. The minister looked startled. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No." James finally turned to face Sophia, his expression cold and distant, a look she'd never seen before. "I can't do this. You're too poor. This was a mistake." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. The church erupted in shocked gasps and whispers. "What?" she managed, her voice barely audible. "Let's be realistic," James continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We come from different worlds. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, but it does. I need someone who understands my lifestyle, my ambitions. You'll always be limited." Margaret Bennett nodded approvingly from her seat. Sophia felt the room spinning around her, her carefully constructed dreams crumbling. James turned away, stepping down from the altar. "James," she called, finding her voice at last. "You don't mean this. What happened to everything we talked about? Our plans? Our future?" He paused, not even turning to face her. "I've made my decision. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." The inconvenience, as if her broken heart were nothing more than a canceled dinner reservation. As James walked down the side aisle toward a door near the altar, the guests began murmuring loudly, some already standing to leave, others staring at Sophia with undisguised pity. And then it happened. The enormous oak doors at the rear of the church swung open with a thunderous boom that silenced every whisper. Framed in the doorway stood a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, wearing what was clearly a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary. Two men in dark suits and earpieces flanked him, scanning the room with professional vigilance. The wedding planner frantically flipped through her clipboard. "Excuse me, sir. This is a private ceremony." But the man was already walking down the aisle, his gaze fixed on Sophia. She stood frozen at the altar, wedding dress shimmering in the light from the stained glass windows, tears still wet on her cheeks. From the front row, Sophia heard her mother make a strange sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. Ellen Parker gripped her husband Robert's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Ellen?" Robert whispered, concerned. "Do you know this man?" But Ellen seemed unable to speak, her face drained of all color. The silver-haired stranger reached the altar steps, stopping just below Sophia. Up close, she could see his eyes, a startling, familiar shade of blue that matched her own. "Hello, daughter," he said, his deep voice gentle but carrying throughout the church. "It seems I'm just in time. I'm Alexander Montgomery." The name sent another wave of murmurs through the guests. Even James, who had been about to exit through the side door, froze in place. "Alexander Montgomery?" someone whispered. "The Alexander Montgomery? The tech billionaire?" Sophia stared at the man claiming to be her father. The father she'd been told had abandoned them when she was a toddler, the man her mother refused to discuss. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here? How did you even know?" "I've been looking for you for a very long time, Sophia," Alexander said, his expression solemn. "And it seems that today, fate finally decided to bring us together." Behind them, James Bennett slowly turned around, his eyes wide as he calculated what this meant. The woman he had just publicly rejected as too poor was apparently the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country. The church erupted into chaos. "Everyone out!" Alexander's security team began ushering the stunned wedding guests toward the exits. "The family needs privacy." Margaret Bennett attempted to approach, her expression now almost comically transformed into a smile. "Mr. Montgomery, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm sure there's been a terrible misunderstanding with my son." One of Alexander's security guards stepped smoothly between them. "Ma'am, please exit with the other guests." Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her mind struggling to process the seismic shifts occurring in her life. Within the span of 10 minutes, she had been rejected at the altar and reunited with the billionaire father she'd never known. It was too much. "I think I need to sit down," she murmured, her knees buckling slightly. Zoe rushed forward, helping her to a pew. Ellen approached cautiously, her face ashen as she confronted the man she had clearly never expected to see again. "Alexander," she said softly, her voice strained. "After all these years, 25 years, 2 months and 16 days to be exact," Alexander replied, his tone neutral but his eyes intense. "That's how long it's been since you disappeared with our daughter." Robert stepped protectively closer to Ellen. "I think we all need to calm down and—" "I am calm," Alexander said, though the tension in his shoulders suggested otherwise. "I've waited over 2 decades for this moment." Sophia found her voice at last. "Why now? Why here? Did you know about the wedding? Were you just waiting for the most dramatic moment possible to make your entrance?" Alexander's expression softened as he turned back to his daughter. "No, Sophia. I've been searching for you for years. My investigators finally located you 3 days ago. When they informed me you were getting married today, I flew back from Tokyo immediately. I had no idea what would happen at the ceremony. I just knew I couldn't miss the chance to finally see you." James cleared his throat from where he stood, clearly reconsidering his hasty exit. "Sophia, perhaps we should talk privately. There's clearly been a misunderstanding." Sophia turned to him, anger cutting through her shock. "A misunderstanding? You called me too poor in front of everyone I know. You humiliated me at what was supposed to be the happiest moment of our lives. And now that you think I might have access to money, you want to talk?" Alexander's gaze hardened as he evaluated James. "You're the groom, I presume? The one who just rejected my daughter for her perceived lack of wealth?" James straightened his tie nervously. "Sir, if I had known she was your daughter, then what?" Alexander cut him off. "You would have treated her differently? Loved her more? Been kinder?" He shook his head in disgust. "Thank you for showing your true character before she made the mistake of marrying you." The church was nearly empty now. only Sophia's immediate family and James remaining with Alexander and his security team. In the sudden quiet, Sophia turned to her mother. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Did you know who my father really was?" Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Sophia, please understand. Things were complicated between Alexander and me." "Complicated?" Alexander interrupted. "Is that what you call taking our child and disappearing in the middle of the night? Changing your names? Moving across the country? Making it impossible for me to find you?" "You were impossible," Ellen burst out, years of pent-up emotion finally breaking through. "All you cared about was your company, your empire. You worked 20-hour days. You missed her first steps, her first words, everything. When I suggested you cut back hours to spend time with your daughter, you said your business wouldn't run itself." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I was building a legacy for her, for both of you. She needed a father, not a legacy." Ellen shot back. Sophia stood up, her wedding dress rustling. "Stop it, both of you. I'm standing right here. After 25 years, I think I deserve some answers that aren't shouted across a church." Alexander and Ellen fell silent, both looking chastened. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," Robert suggested gently. "The church staff will want to close up." James took a tentative step forward. "Sophia, I think we should leave," she finished for him, her voice steady and cold. "You've made your position very clear, James. Nothing has changed." She glanced at Alexander, then back to James. "I was too poor 10 minutes ago, and finding out who my father is doesn't change who I am." James began to protest, but one of Alexander's security guards moved closer. Taking the hint, James nodded stiffly and headed for the door, pausing only briefly to say, "I'll call you tomorrow, when things have settled down." After he left, Alexander turned to Sophia. "I have a car waiting outside. We could go somewhere to talk, anywhere you'd like." For the first time, Sophia noticed vulnerability beneath her father's composed exterior. Despite his wealth and power, he was nervous, afraid she might reject him. "Let's go to my apartment," she decided. "It's small, but it's my home." Alexander nodded. "I'd be honored." 30 minutes later, Sophia had changed out of her wedding dress into jeans and a sweater. Her tiny living room was crowded with Alexander, Ellen, Robert, and Zoe, everyone perched awkwardly on mismatched furniture. A painful silence hung in the air. "So," Sophia said finally, "I'm guessing you didn't just lose my phone number for 25 years. Alexander's lips curved in a sad smile. "You have my sense of humor, I see." He took a deep breath. "The truth is complicated, but you deserve to hear all of it. Your mother and I met when she was working as an executive assistant at my first tech company. It was a whirlwind romance, and within a year, we were married with a baby on the way." "You." Ellen stared down at her hands. "We were so young. Alexander was just starting to see real success, and suddenly he was working all the time, consumed by his company. I was trying to build something that would last," Alexander said, his voice tight. "Something that would secure our future." "But you missed everything," Ellen replied. "Sophia's first steps, her first birthday. You were always at the office or traveling for business." "We fought about it constantly," Alexander admitted. "Each time I promised to do better, to be more present. Each time I failed." Sophia watched the pain on both their faces, glimpsing the young couple they once were, in love but unable to reconcile their different needs. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "Why did you leave?" Ellen looked up, meeting Alexander's eyes. "After a particularly bad argument, you threatened to seek full custody if I kept interfering with your work." Alexander winced. "It was said in anger. I never meant it. But I believed you would do it," Ellen continued. "You had the money, the power, the connections. I was terrified of losing my daughter. So one night, while you were on a business trip to Singapore, I packed our things and left. I changed our last name from Montgomery to Parker, my mother's maiden name. We moved from California to Arizona, then eventually to New York. I hired private investigators," Alexander said, turning to Sophia. "For years, I looked for you both, but your mother was thorough. New identities, no contact with mutual friends. It wasn't until the internet era that facial recognition technology finally gave me a lead." "So, how did you find me now?" Sophia asked. Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. "This is from 3 months ago. Your school was featured in a local education piece." Sophia took the clipping, recognizing the photo of herself with her kindergarten class after they'd won a community garden award. Such a small, ordinary moment, yet it had bridged a 25-year gap. "I've missed so much of your life," Alexander said softly. "Your childhood, your education. You're becoming this remarkable young woman. I can never get those years back. But if you're willing, I'd like the chance to know you now." Sophia looked at this stranger who was her father, this powerful, wealthy man who seemed so genuinely vulnerable as he waited for her response. Then she looked at her mother, the woman who had worked multiple jobs to give her a stable life, who had sacrificed and struggled and never complained. "I don't know what to say," Sophia admitted. This morning I was about to marry a man I thought loved me. Now I discover he only valued wealth, and my long-lost billionaire father has suddenly appeared." She laughed shakily. "It's a lot to process. Take all the time you need," Alexander said gently. "I've waited 25 years. I can wait longer if necessary." Zoe, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "I hate to bring this up, but what about James? He's bound to come crawling back now." Sophia's expression hardened. "James showed me who he really is today. I never want to see him again." But even as she said the words, her phone lit up with an incoming call. James's name flashed on the screen. Alexander raised an eyebrow. That didn't take long. Sophia silenced the phone. "He can wait. Right now, I have 25 years of questions for you." And for the next several hours, that's exactly what they did. Talked, cried, laughed occasionally, beginning the long process of building a bridge across the decades that had separated them. As evening fell, Sophia realized that despite the heartbreak of the morning, she felt a strange sense of possibility. One door had closed brutally, but another had opened, one she had never even known existed. The week following what should have been her wedding day passed in a blur for Sophia. Each morning, she still woke with a moment of disorientation, expecting to find herself in the honeymoon suite James had booked at the Maldives resort, only to recognize the familiar ceiling of her small apartment. The pain of his rejection remained raw, but it was increasingly overshadowed by the extraordinary discovery of her father. Alexander had taken a suite at the Four Seasons, refusing to leave New York until he and Sophia had begun to establish a relationship. Each day, he would call or text, careful not to overwhelm her but making it clear he was available whenever she was ready to talk again. James was less restrained. He called constantly, left voicemails ranging from apologetic to demanding, and even sent an enormous arrangement of roses that took up half of Sophia's small living room. "The card says he wants to explain," Zoe noted, reading the message while Sophia watered her houseplants, deliberately ignoring the floral monstrosity. "He says it was pre-wedding jitters and a momentary lapse of judgment. Interesting timing for his change of heart," Sophia replied dryly. "Right after he discovered who my father is." "What are you going to do about him?" Zoe asked, tossing the card into the trash where it belonged. Sophia sighed. "Eventually, I'll have to talk to him, but not yet. I'm still sorting through everything else." Everything else primarily meant Alexander Montgomery, the father she was just beginning to know. They had met for dinner twice more that week, each time at quiet, discreet restaurants where his security team could ensure their privacy. Sophia had learned more about his rise from a middle-class engineering student to tech visionary, while he had eagerly absorbed every detail she shared about her life, her education, her love of teaching, her friends. "You've done well for yourself," he'd said during their last dinner. "I'm proud of the woman you've become, Sophia. Your mother did a wonderful job raising you." The genuine admiration in his voice had touched her. Despite his wealth and power, Alexander never made her feel that her career choice was insignificant or that her modest lifestyle was something to be ashamed of, unlike James and his family. On Friday morning, Sophia was preparing her classroom for the day when her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. "Good morning," she answered, balancing the phone as she arranged finger paints on the art table. "Good morning, Sophia," Alexander's deep voice replied. "I hope I'm not interrupting your preparations. Just setting up for a messy art project. 25-year-olds with paint. What could go wrong?" His warm chuckle made her smile. There was something surreal about discussing kindergarten finger painting with a billionaire tech mogul, but Alexander always seemed genuinely interested in her day-to-day life. "I was calling to make you an offer," he said. "I need to return to my home in the Caribbean tomorrow. Business matters I can't postpone any longer. I was wondering if you might consider joining me there next weekend. I could send the jet for you on Friday after school, and you could stay until Sunday evening." Sophia nearly dropped a jar of blue paint. "Your private jet? It would be the simplest arrangement," Alexander said, as casually as if he were offering to send an Uber. "I thought it might be good for us to spend some time getting to know each other away from distractions. Distractions like James," Sophia thought, and the media, which had somehow gotten wind of Alexander Montgomery's long-lost daughter and had begun calling her school and camping outside her apartment building. "I'd understand completely if you're not comfortable with the idea," Alexander added quickly. "Perhaps it's too soon." "No," Sophia found herself saying. "Actually, I think I'd like that." After the chaos of the past week, the idea of escaping to a Caribbean island was undeniably appealing. Besides, she was curious about Alexander's life, the world that might have been hers if history had taken a different turn. "Wonderful." The genuine pleasure in his voice was unmistakable. "I'll have my assistant Eleanor send you all the details." After they hung up, Sophia stood motionless in her colorful classroom, trying to process the reality that next weekend, she would be flying on a private jet to visit her billionaire father in the Caribbean. How had her life transformed so completely in the span of a week? Her contemplation was interrupted by a knock at the classroom door. When she turned, she found James standing there, impeccably dressed in one of his designer suits, holding yet another bouquet. "James," she said flatly, "I'm preparing for my class. You shouldn't be here." He stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. "Sophia, please. You've been ignoring my calls. I just need 5 minutes to explain why you publicly humiliated me at our wedding, why you called me too poor in front of everyone I care about." The anger she'd been suppressing all week flared up. "There's nothing to discuss." "I panicked," James said, his handsome face contrite. "It was pre-wedding anxiety, cold feet, whatever you want to call it. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been paying for it every minute since." He stepped closer. "You have to believe me, Sophia. What I did was unforgivable, but I'm asking for your forgiveness anyway. I love you." Sophia studied him, the man she had been prepared to spend her life with just a week ago. He looked sincere, his eyes pleading, but she couldn't help noticing how he kept glancing at his watch. A new one, she noted, even more expensive than the luxury timepiece he usually wore. "Is there somewhere you need to be?" she asked pointedly. James blinked, then quickly covered the watch with his sleeve. "No, of course not. You're my priority, Sophia. You've always been my priority." "Really? Because last Saturday, your priority seemed to be making sure you didn't marry someone who didn't meet your financial requirements." He winced. "I told you, I wasn't thinking clearly. It was a momentary madness. And your mother's approval had nothing to do with it? I saw her nodding when you walked away from me." James sighed dramatically. "My mother has always been difficult, you know that. But I've told her in no uncertain terms that you're the woman I love, and she needs to accept that." "What changed her mind, I wonder?" Sophia asked. "Could it be that I'm suddenly Alexander Montgomery's daughter?" "That's not fair," James protested, though his eyes shifted away from hers. "Look, does it matter why she's finally ready to welcome you to the family? The important thing is that she is." Before Sophia could respond, the door opened and her students began streaming in, chattering excitedly as they hung up their backpacks and greeted their teacher. James stepped back, clearly frustrated by the interruption. "We need to finish this conversation," he said. "Have dinner with me tonight. Please, Sophia, give me a chance to make this right." Looking at the children's eager faces as they discovered the finger paints, Sophia found clarity. "These kids judge people by how kind they are, not by what's in their bank accounts. They've taught me a lot, James, including how to recognize what truly matters." She handed him back the flowers. "I have to start class now. Please don't come here again." His expression hardened momentarily before he forced a smile. "You're upset. I understand. I'll call you this weekend when you've had more time to think." After he left, Sophia turned her attention to her students, pushing thoughts of James aside. She loved these moments. 20 bright young minds exploring colors and textures, creating with uninhibited joy. Their laughter and concentration grounded her, reminding her of what she valued most in life. That evening, Sophia packed a small suitcase for her weekend in the Caribbean, still marveling at the direction her life had taken. As she folded a sundress, her phone pinged with a text from Alexander. "Looking forward to showing you my home. It's been empty for too long without family." The simple message brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Despite their brief acquaintance, she was beginning to feel a connection to this man who was her father. A sense that part of her that had always been missing was finally falling into place. The following Friday, Sophia found herself boarding a sleek private jet at Teterboro Airport. A friendly crew greeted her by name, showing her to a luxurious leather seat and offering refreshments before takeoff. The interior was elegant but not ostentatious, much like Alexander himself, who seemed to view his wealth as a tool rather than a showcase. 3 hours later, the plane began its descent toward a private island in the Caribbean. As they approached, Sophia gasped at the view from her window. Crystal blue waters surrounding a lush green island, with a sprawling compound nestled along one pristine beach. "Welcome to Isla Montgomery, Ms. Parker," the pilot announced. "Current temperature is 82 degrees, with clear skies. Mr. Montgomery is waiting for you at the main house." The plane touched down on a private airstrip, and as Sophia descended the stairs, she was struck by the warm, fragrant air, so different from New York in early spring. Alexander was standing beside a vintage Land Rover, his face breaking into a wide smile when he saw her. "You made it," he said, stepping forward to greet her. There was an awkward moment when neither was sure whether to hug or shake hands, but Alexander gently took her weekend bag. "How was your flight?" "Definitely the most comfortable flying experience of my life," Sophia admitted, following him to the vehicle. "Though I kept feeling guilty about having that entire plane just for me." Alexander laughed. "The plane was making the trip regardless. I have executives flying back and forth from New York constantly. We just made sure you were the only passenger." As they drove along a winding coastal road, Sophia took in the breathtaking scenery. "This place is incredible," she said. "How long have you had it?" "I purchased the island about 20 years ago," Alexander replied, his eyes on the road. It was around the time I'd finally accepted that finding you and your mother might take much longer than I'd hoped. I needed a sanctuary, somewhere to retreat when the search became too painful. Sophia felt a pang at the reminder of all the years they'd lost. Despite her initial skepticism about his story, each interaction with Alexander had convinced her that he truly had spent decades looking for her, that he had never willingly abandoned her as she'd been led to believe. They rounded a bend, and the main house came into view, a sprawling, elegant structure with wide verandas and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the ocean views. It was grand without being imposing, and as they pulled up to the entrance, several staff members emerged to greet them. "Welcome home, Mr. Montgomery," a woman in her 60s said warmly, before turning to Sophia. "And welcome to you, Miss Parker. I'm Eleanor, your father's chief of staff. We're all so delighted to finally meet you." There was something in Eleanor's eyes, a genuine emotion that caught Sophia off guard. "Thank you," she said. "It's nice to meet you too. Eleanor has been with me for over 30 years, Alexander explained. She's more family than employee at this point. 32 years, Eleanor corrected with a smile. "I've been hoping to meet you for a very long time, Miss Parker. Please, call me Sophia." Alexander led her into the house, which was even more beautiful inside. Open and airy, with natural materials and comfortable furnishings rather than the cold, sterile luxury Sophia had half expected. There were books everywhere, art on the walls that looked chosen with care rather than for status, and family photographs. Sophia stopped abruptly, noticing a framed photo on a side table. It was her, or rather, a much younger version of her, maybe 6 or 7 years old, in what appeared to be a school play. She was dressed as a tree, her small face beaming from between construction paper branches. "How do you have this?" she asked, picking up the frame. Alexander's expression was both sad and hopeful. "That was the first photo my investigators managed to find of you after you disappeared. It was in a local newspaper in Phoenix, your elementary school's production of The Giving Tree. You were 7. Sophia stared at the image, then noticed other frames nearby, more photos of her throughout the years. Her middle school science fair, a high school track meet, her college graduation. "You've been watching me all this time?" she asked, unsure whether to feel touched or unnerved. "Not watching," Alexander said carefully. "Finding moments, whenever I could. I was never close, never interfering. Just making sure you were okay, collecting pieces of the life I was missing." He hesitated. "I know it might seem strange, even intrusive, but these photos kept me going when the search seemed hopeless." Sophia set down the frame, emotions warring within her. "I need a minute to process this." "Of course," Alexander said quickly. "Would you like to see your room? You can rest before dinner if you'd like." The guest suite was beautiful, a serene space with a private terrace overlooking the ocean. After Alexander left her to settle in, Sophia sat on the edge of the king-size bed, trying to reconcile the man she was coming to know with these new revelations. There was something both comforting and disquieting about discovering she had never been as alone as she'd thought, that somewhere, her father had been collecting traces of her life, keeping her in his heart despite their separation. After freshening up, Sophia decided to explore the house before dinner. As she wandered down a hallway lined with bookshelves, she noticed a door that was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open and froze. The room before her was unlike any other in the house. Where the rest of the home was open and bright, this space felt like a shrine, the blinds partially drawn. The walls were covered with a timeline, photographs, newspaper clippings, documents, all connected with red string. In the center was a map with dozens of pins marking locations across the country. But what truly stopped Sophia's heart was the collection of wrapped presents stacked carefully along one wall, dozens of them, each labeled with her name and a date. Birthday gifts, she realized. 25 years of birthday gifts that had never been delivered. "I see you found the room." Sophia turned to find Eleanor in the doorway, her expression gentle. "What is this place?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Your father calls it the heart room," Eleanor said, stepping inside. "It's where he kept everything related to you. The investigation files, the photos we managed to obtain, the timeline of your movements over the years." She gestured to the presents. "And those. He bought you a birthday gift every year, hoping he would find you in time to give it to you. When he didn't, he saved them." Sophia approached the stack of presents, her fingers brushing over the careful labels. Each one represented a year of her life, and a year of her father's waiting. "He never gave up," Eleanor continued. "Even when everyone, including his lawyers and some of our board members, told him to move on, he just kept searching." "Why would the board care about his personal life?" Sophia asked. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly. "That's complicated. Your father is an intensely private person, but his company is very public. When you establish a trust and succession plan for a corporation worth billions, all sorts of people develop opinions about your personal choices. Succession plan? Sophia repeated. You mean, who inherits the company? Until a week ago, the plan was quite settled, Eleanor said carefully. But now that you've been found, she trailed off, seeming to regret having said this much. That's really your father's business to discuss with you, when he's ready. I've already said too much. Before Sophia could press further, they heard Alexander calling her name from the main living area. We should join him for dinner, Eleanor said, moving toward the door. But Sophia, you should know something. Your appearance in your father's life has unsettled certain expectations. Be careful who you trust, including people from your past who might suddenly find you more interesting now. The warning sent a chill down Sophia's spine. You mean James? Eleanor's expression remained neutral. I simply mean that your father's world comes with complexities you haven't had to navigate before. Wealth attracts opportunists, something Alexander learned the hard way long ago. With that cryptic statement, she gestured for Sophia to follow her to dinner, leaving the heart room and its revelations behind them. But as they walked, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that finding her father had not only filled a void in her life, it had also exposed her to dangers she was only beginning to comprehend. Dinner was served on a terrace overlooking the ocean, the table illuminated by lanterns that swayed gently in the evening breeze. The food was exquisite but unpretentious. Fresh seafood, tropical fruits, dishes that celebrated the island's resources rather than imported luxuries. Throughout the meal, Alexander asked Sophia about her teaching, her friends, her interests, seeming to absorb every detail with genuine fascination. In turn, he shared stories of his own life, painting a picture of a man driven but lonely, successful in business but missing what mattered most to him. I built this company thinking I was creating a legacy for my family, he said as they lingered over dessert, only to discover that without the family the legacy meant nothing. Later that night, as Sophia stood on her private terrace watching moonlight shimmer across the Caribbean, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from James. I miss you. I made a mistake. I love you, not your net worth. Please come home so we can start over. She stared at the message, thinking about Eleanor's warning. Was James truly repentant? Or was he just another opportunist drawn to the Montgomery fortune? And more importantly, what did it say about their relationship that she even had to wonder? With a decisive swipe, she deleted the message without responding, then turned off her phone entirely. Whatever complications her new relationship with Alexander might bring, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. She deserved better than a man who had only valued her when he thought she came with a financial advantage. Behind her, the vast house glowed warmly against the night sky, her father's sanctuary, and perhaps, someday, a place where she too might belong. For the first time since that devastating moment at the altar, Sophia felt a spark of gratitude for James's rejection. If he hadn't abandoned her that day, she might never have discovered the truth about her past, or glimpsed the possibilities of her future. The weekend at Alexander's Island passed too quickly. By Sunday evening, as Sophia prepared to return to New York and her classroom of kindergartners, she felt a genuine reluctance to leave. In just 2 days, she and Alexander had begun building a relationship that felt increasingly natural, connecting over shared interests, discovering similar traits, and gradually filling in the enormous blank spaces in each other's lives. You'll come back soon? Alexander asked as they stood beside the waiting jet. Perhaps for a longer stay during your summer break. I'd like that, Sophia replied, surprised by how much she meant it. And you'll visit me in New York? Try to keep me away, he smiled, then hesitated before adding, actually, I'll be there next week for several board meetings. Perhaps we could have dinner, and if you're comfortable with the idea, I'd like to introduce you to some of my colleagues. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You want to show me off to the board? Not show you off, Alexander corrected gently. But yes, introduce you. You're my daughter, Sophia, the most important person in my life. It's time people know that. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped forward and hugged him, their first real embrace. Alexander seemed momentarily stunned before wrapping his arms around her, holding her with a careful tenderness that spoke volumes about his fear of pushing too fast. I'll see you next week. Then, she said as they separated, just let me know when and where. During the flight back to New York, Sophia found herself reflecting on Eleanor's warning about people who might now find her more interesting. The most obvious example was James, who had continued his campaign of calls, texts, and elaborate flower arrangements throughout the weekend. But as she settled back into her apartment and her teaching routine, she noticed other, more subtle changes. A parent at her school who had barely acknowledged her before suddenly invited her to join the board of an exclusive charity. The landlord who had been indifferent about fixing her leaky faucet now responded to her maintenance request within hours. Even the barista at her local coffee shop eyed her with new curiosity when she ordered her usual simple latte. Word had spread, it seemed. The humble kindergarten teacher was now Alexander Montgomery's daughter, and that changed everything. James was waiting outside her classroom when she finished teaching on Wednesday afternoon. He looked immaculate as always, though she noticed dark circles under his eyes that his carefully maintained tan couldn't quite conceal. 5 minutes, he said before she could object. That's all I'm asking for. Too tired to argue. Sophia nodded, leading him to a small conference room where they could speak privately. I've been thinking about what happened, James began immediately. Not just at the wedding, but everything leading up to it. I let my mother's expectations influence me in ways I'm not proud of. Your mother didn't make you abandon me at the altar, Sophia pointed out. You did that all on your own. James winced. I know. There's no excuse for how I treated you. But Sophia, we had 2 years together. 2 good years. Does one terrible mistake erase all of that? It wasn't just a mistake, James. It was a revelation of character. She studied him, noticing how he kept checking his luxury watch, a nervous habit she'd never paid much attention to before. Why are you really here? Is it because you miss me, or because you discovered I'm Alexander Montgomery's daughter? That's not fair, he protested. I loved you before I knew who your father was, and yet you called me too poor and walked away from our wedding. Those don't sound like the actions of a man in love. James leaned forward, his expression earnest. I panicked. The commitment, the finality of it all. It overwhelmed me. I fixated on our different backgrounds as an excuse because I was too cowardly to admit I was simply afraid of marriage itself. He reached for her hand. But losing you has shown me what really matters. I want another chance, Sophia. A fresh start. There was such sincerity in his voice that for a moment, Sophia hesitated. They had shared good times, vacations, laughter, plans for the future. Was she being too harsh, too unforgiving? Then she remembered the cold look in his eyes as he'd rejected her at the altar, and the calculating interest that had replaced it when Alexander appeared. Some betrayals cut too deep for second chances. I'm sorry, James. We're over. Please respect that and stop contacting me. His jaw tightened momentarily before he nodded, rising to his feet. I understand you need more time. I'll be patient, Sophia. What we had is worth fighting for. After he left, Sophia sat alone in the conference room, troubled by his persistence. There was something almost desperate in his determination, something that didn't align with the James she thought she'd known. It was as if he couldn't accept that she might truly walk away, that his charm and good looks wouldn't eventually win her back. That evening, a sleek town car arrived to take Sophia to dinner with Alexander at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant. As she entered the private dining room, she was surprised to find not just her father waiting, but several other people as well. Sophia, Alexander greeted her warmly. I hope you don't mind the slight change of plans. These are some key members of my executive team who happen to be in town for our meetings. Over the next 2 hours, Sophia met a parade of polished, articulate professionals, Alexander's chief legal counsel, his chief financial officer, his head of global operations. Each greeted her with seemingly genuine pleasure, though she couldn't help noticing the assessing looks that accompanied their smiles. One man in particular stood out, Victor Kingsley, introduced as Alexander's protege and executive vice president. In his early 40s, with sharp features and watchful eyes, Victor's handshake lingered a moment too long as he studied her. The resemblance is remarkable, he commented. You have Alexander's eyes exactly. How extraordinary that fate has brought you back into his life after all these years. There was something in his tone, a tightness beneath the smooth words, that put Sophia instantly on guard. Yes, she replied simply. Quite extraordinary. As dinner progressed, Sophia observed the dynamics at the table with growing interest. The executives clearly respected Alexander, but they also watched him carefully, adjusting their comments based on his reactions. Victor, in particular, seemed attuned to Alexander's every gesture, often finishing his sentences or reinforcing his points. Victor has been my right hand for nearly 15 years, Alexander explained, noticing Sophia's attention. He joined the company straight out of business school and has been on a meteoric rise ever since. Many consider him my presumptive successor. At the word successor, Sophia noticed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Victor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, while the CFO and legal counsel exchanged quick glances. Of course, Alexander continued, recent events may necessitate some reconsideration of our long-term strategic planning. He smiled at Sophia. Family has a way of reshaping priorities. The implications of this statement weren't lost on anyone at the table, least of all Victor, whose knuckles whitened around his water glass. For the first time, Sophia fully understood Eleanor's warning. Her appearance in Alexander's life hadn't just filled a personal void, it had disrupted a carefully established corporate succession plan. After dinner, as Sophia prepared to leave, Victor approached her by the coat check. It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Parker, he said smoothly. Alexander speaks of nothing else these days. It's remarkable how quickly you've become the center of his world. We're just getting to know each other. Sophia replied carefully. 25 years is a lot of catching up to do. Victor nodded, his smile not reaching his eyes. Indeed, and Alexander is nothing if not thorough when he sets his mind to something. I imagine he's already discussing the company with you. Your potential role in its future? Actually, no, Sophia said truthfully. We've focused on personal matters so far. How refreshing, Victor murmured. Though, if I may offer some friendly advice, corporate governance and succession planning are complex areas with significant legal and fiduciary implications. It would be unfortunate if Alexander's understandable emotional response to finding you led to hasty decisions that might not serve the company's best interests. Before Sophia could respond to this thinly veiled warning, Alexander appeared beside them. Ready to go? He asked her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. His eyes, however, were fixed on Victor with an unreadable expression. In the car afterward, Sophia asked, "Is Victor always so intense?" Alexander chuckled, though without much humor. Victor is brilliant, dedicated, and ambitious. He's helped build Montgomery Enterprises into what it is today, and for that, I will always be grateful. He paused. But yes, he can be intense, especially when he feels his position might be threatened. Threatened by me? Sophia asked incredulously. I'm a kindergarten teacher, not a corporate executive. Alexander's expression softened. You're my daughter, Sophia, my only child. In Victor's mind, that changes everything. He hesitated before adding, there's something else you should know. The board has scheduled a press conference for next month where I was planning to officially announce you as my daughter and heir. Heir, Sophia repeated, startled. Alexander, I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't know the first thing about running a global corporation. I'm happy teaching 5-year-olds their ABCs. Of course, and I would never push you into a role you didn't want, Alexander assured her. But by publicly acknowledging you as my daughter, certain legal realities automatically come into play regarding inheritance and succession. Regardless of your interest in an active role, Sophia frowned, processing this information. And this would affect Victor's position? Let's just say it would introduce variables to a future that Victor had previously considered quite settled. The following weekend, Sophia met Zoe for brunch at their favorite cafe. After catching up on regular life matters, Sophia shared her concerns about Victor and the unexpected corporate politics she'd been thrust into. I never asked for any of this, she sighed. I was just starting to enjoy getting to know my father as a person. Now suddenly I'm in the middle of some succession drama straight out of a TV show. Zoe lowered her voice. Speaking of drama, have you heard from James lately? He's still sending daily messages, though I've stopped responding, Sophia replied. Why? Because I saw something interesting on Instagram yesterday. Zoe pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly before turning the screen towards Sophia. My cousin's girlfriend works at Meridian Capital, the firm that finances most of James's real estate developments. According to her, James's company is in serious trouble. They've lost several major investors in the past month, and they're scrambling to avoid bankruptcy. Sophia stared at the social media post, a cryptic complaint about supposedly successful developers who are actually running on fumes. While it didn't name James directly, the timing was suspicious. You think that's why he's suddenly so desperate to reconcile? She asked. Because he needs money? Zoe shrugged. I'm just saying the timing is interesting. He dumps you for being too poor, then discovers you're a billionaire's daughter right as his company is facing financial collapse. That's quite a coincidence. Troubled by this revelation, Sophia decided to do some investigating of her own. That evening, she began searching online for information about James's recent projects. Most news articles portrayed his developments as successful and innovative, but digging deeper, she found concerning patterns, construction delays, permit issues, and indeed, several reports of investor pullouts. Her phone lit up with a text from James. Missing you tonight. Dinner tomorrow? There's something important I want to discuss. The next day, after her students had gone home, Sophia was erasing the chalkboard when she heard a knock at her classroom door. Expecting the janitor, she turned to find Victor Kingsley standing in the doorway. Mr. Kingsley, she said, unable to hide her surprise. This is unexpected. Please, call me Victor, he replied, stepping into the classroom and glancing around at the colorful artwork and alphabet charts. Charming space, so different from the corporate boardrooms I'm used to. What can I do for you? Sophia asked, keeping the counter between them. There was something unsettling about Victor's presence in her classroom, worlds colliding in a way that felt invasive. I thought we should have a frank conversation, away from Alexander's watchful eye, Victor said. He's a remarkable man, your father. Brilliant, visionary. But sometimes his personal feelings cloud his business judgment. And you're here to make sure that doesn't happen? Sophia guessed. Victor smiled thinly. I'm here because I've dedicated 15 years of my life to Montgomery Enterprises. I've sacrificed relationships, health, personal interests, everything to help build Alexander's vision into reality. He picked up a small clay sculpture one of her students had made. I was there during the company's darkest days, when we nearly went bankrupt. I helped Alexander rebuild, restructure, and emerge stronger. I've earned my place as his successor. That's between you and my father, Sophia said firmly. It has nothing to do with me. But it does, Victor countered, setting down the sculpture. Because Alexander is planning to announce you as his heir at next month's press conference. A kindergarten teacher with no business experience, no understanding of our corporate structure, suddenly positioned to potentially control billions of dollars and thousands of employees' livelihoods. I haven't asked for any of this, Sophia insisted. Perhaps not explicitly, Victor acknowledged. But your very existence threatens the stability of everything we've built, unless, of course, we can find a reasonable accommodation. What kind of accommodation did you have in mind? Victor's expression grew calculating. You want a relationship with your father. That's understandable. But you don't need to disrupt the corporate succession plan to have that. Sign a simple agreement waiving certain inheritance rights related to company control, and I'll personally ensure Alexander still provides generously for you. Everyone wins. The audacity of his proposal left Sophia momentarily speechless. Let me get this straight, she finally said. You want me to sign away rights I didn't even know I had, to protect your position, before I've even had a chance to understand what those rights entail? I'm offering you a clean solution before things get complicated, Victor replied, his tone hardening slightly. Alexander's health isn't what it once was. Stressful situations could be problematic for him. The implied threat was unmistakable. Are you suggesting my presence in his life is harmful to him? I'm suggesting that corporate power struggles can be extremely stressful, Victor said, even when they involve family, especially when they involve family. Before Sophia could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, James, holding yet another bouquet. Sophia, I was hoping. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Victor. I didn't realize you had company. The two men assessed each other with immediate wariness, like predators encountering an unexpected rival. Something in their mutual recognition struck Sophia as odd, too familiar for men who should have been strangers. Do you two know each other? She asked, looking between them. No, they answered simultaneously, then exchanged quick glances. Mr. Kingsley was just leaving, Sophia said pointedly. And James, I've told you to stop coming to my workplace. Victor straightened his already perfect tie. Think about what I said, Miss Parker. Some decisions need to be made before the press conference, for everyone's benefit. With a curt nod to James, he left the classroom. As soon as he was gone, James stepped forward. What was that about? What press conference? Nothing that concerns you, Sophia replied, taking the flowers and placing them on a counter without enthusiasm. Why are you here, James? I've been thinking about us, he began, his expression earnest. About fresh starts and second chances. About how sometimes fate gives us an opportunity to rebuild something better than before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia Parker, will you marry me? Again, but for real this time? Sophia stared at the ring, larger and more ostentatious than the one he'd given her before. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, James insisted. Look, I know I hurt you badly. What I did was unforgivable, but I'm asking for forgiveness anyway. We can start over. Elope somewhere tropical, just the two of us. No families, no pressure, just love. As he spoke, Sophia noticed his eyes darting repeatedly to his watch, the same nervous habit she'd observed before. Only this time, she saw what appeared to be a text notification light blinking on its face, a smartwatch disguised as a luxury timepiece. Who are you communicating with right now? She asked abruptly. James blinked. What? No one. I was just checking the time. On a watch that's receiving messages? Sophia stepped back, pieces suddenly clicking into place. You know Victor Kingsley, don't you? That's who you're communicating with right now. That's ridiculous, James scoffed, though his hand moved to cover the watch. I've never met the man before today. But Sophia's mind was racing, connecting dots she should have seen earlier. James's real estate company facing financial trouble. Victor feeling threatened by her appearance in Alexander's life. The two men's oddly familiar tension in the classroom. How long have you known who I really was? She asked quietly. That I was Alexander Montgomery's daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, James insisted, but his eyes shifted away, the same tell he'd had when lying about forgetting their anniversary last year. Get out, Sophia said, her voice shaking with anger. Get out and don't come back. After James left, Sophia sat at her small teacher's desk, her mind whirling with suspicions but lacking concrete proof. On impulse, she called Zoe. I need your help, she said when her friend answered. How good are your social media investigation skills? Legend level, Zoe replied without hesitation. What am I looking for? Any connection between James Bennett and Victor Kingsley from Montgomery Enterprises? Photos at the same events? Mutual contacts? Anything. On it. Give me until tomorrow. That night, Sophia received a call from Alexander. "I was wondering if you'd join me for dinner on Saturday," he said. "There's something important I need to discuss with you." "Is everything okay?" she asked, concerned by the serious note in his voice. "Just some matters that would be better addressed in person," Alexander replied. "Eleanor will send a car for you at 7. When Saturday arrived, Sophia was surprised when the driver took her not to a restaurant but to a medical building in Midtown Manhattan. Concerned, she followed signs to a private cardiology practice on the top floor, where she found Alexander waiting in a luxurious reception area. "I'm sorry for the unusual setting," he said, kissing her cheek in greeting. "I had my regular checkup today, and Dr. Brenner suggested I might want to share the results with you." A distinguished older man in a white coat approached, extending his hand. "Ms. Parker, I'm Dr. Brenner. I've been your father's cardiologist for nearly a decade." The gravity in his expression sent a chill through Sophia. "What's going on?" Alexander gestured to a private consultation room. "Let's sit down. There are some things you should know." Inside, Dr. Brenner showed Sophia a series of images on a screen, Alexander's heart from different angles, with certain areas highlighted in color. "Your father has a condition called progressive myocardial fibrosis," the doctor explained gently. "It causes gradual stiffening of the heart muscle, making it increasingly difficult for the heart to pump efficiently." Sophia turned to Alexander. "How serious is it?" "Manageable for now," Alexander replied. "I've had it for years, but it's progressing more rapidly than we'd hoped." Without intervention, Dr. Brenner continued, "The condition would typically give Alexander about 12 months of relatively normal function before more severe symptoms develop." "And with intervention?" Sophia asked, her mouth dry. "We're exploring several treatment protocols," the doctor assured her. "Experimental therapies that show promise. Alexander has excellent general health otherwise, which works in his favor." After the doctor left them alone, Sophia sat in stunned silence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to burden our new relationship with my health concerns," Alexander admitted. "We were just getting to know each other, finding our way as father and daughter. But with the press conference approaching and certain business matters needing attention, I realized you needed to know the complete picture." "Is this why Victor is so concerned about the succession plan?" Sophia asked. "Because he knows you're ill," Alexander nodded. "Victor is aware of my condition, as are key board members. It's partly why the succession plan was so firmly established, to ensure stability for the company in case my health deteriorated suddenly." He reached for her hand. "But finding you has changed everything, Sophia. Not just personally, but in terms of my legacy." "I don't want your legacy," Sophia said, her eyes filling with tears. "I want more time with my father. We've already lost 25 years. Alexander squeezed her hand. "And we'll have more time." "I'm not giving up, Sophia, but I need to be practical as well. There are decisions to be made, preparations to consider." Later that evening, as Sophia returned to her apartment, she found Zoe waiting outside her door, tablet in hand and excitement on her face. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said as soon as they were inside. "It took some serious digging, but there's definitely a connection between James and Victor Kingsley." Zoe pulled up a series of images, screenshots from social media, database records, archived news articles. "Here's a photo from a charity golf tournament 3 years ago, before you even met James. He's in the background of a group shot with Victor." "That could be coincidence," Sophia said, though her stomach nodded with suspicion. "Sure, but this isn't," Zoe continued, showing another image. "This is from a real estate conference 2 years ago, right around when you started dating James, and look who's speaking on a panel together." The photo clearly showed James and Victor sitting side by side at a business forum. "There's more," Zoe said grimly. "I found financial records showing that Meridian Capital, the firm that's financing James's developments, has significant investment ties to a venture capital group where Victor Kingsley sits on the advisory board." Sophia sank onto her couch, the implications washing over her. "Are you saying that James knew who I was all along? That he pursued me because of my connection to Alexander?" "I can't prove intent," Zoe admitted, "but the timing is suspicious. James's company started receiving major financing around the same time he coincidentally met you at that community center volunteer event." The community center. Sophia suddenly remembered something odd, how James, a successful developer with no previous history of volunteering, had shown up precisely when she was scheduled to help with the children's reading program. At the time, she'd found it charming that such a wealthy, handsome man would give his time so generously. Now it seemed calculated. "I need to see his apartment," Sophia said suddenly. "What? Why?" "Because if James has been working with Victor all along, there might be evidence in his home," Sophia replied, "and I still have a key." An hour later, they stood outside James's luxury condo. "Are you sure about this?" Zoe whispered as Sophia inserted the key. "This feels like crossing a line. He crossed the line when he humiliated me at our wedding," Sophia replied grimly. I just want the truth." Inside, the apartment was exactly as Sophia remembered, impeccably decorated, with the expensive minimalism James had always preferred. They moved carefully through the rooms, uncertain what they were looking for until Sophia noticed James's home office door was ajar. Inside, his normally pristine desk was covered with documents, and a laptop left open. Sophia approached cautiously, feeling like an intruder despite her justified suspicions. "Sophia, look at this," Zoe said, picking up a folder labeled Montgomery Initiative. Inside were photographs of Sophia going back years, having coffee with friends, teaching at school, even meeting James for the first time at the community center. Each was dated and annotated with details about her routine, connections, and personal habits. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered, her hands shaking. "He was tracking me." Below these, they found emails between James and Victor spanning 3 years, discussing the target, planning the approach, and later strategizing about the wedding and Sophia's integration into James's life. As they read through the exchanges, a horrifying picture emerged. James had been hired by Victor years ago to locate Sophia, gain her trust, and eventually marry her, keeping her unaware of her heritage while reporting her activities back to Victor. The goal seemed to be preventing her from ever reconnecting with Alexander and asserting any claim to the Montgomery Empire. But the most disturbing document was a draft of what appeared to be a post-nuptial agreement designed to be presented to Sophia after their marriage. It contained provisions giving James control over any inheritance she might receive, with a clause about management of assets in case of spouse's incapacitation or death. "He was going to marry me, take control of anything I inherited from Alexander, and then..." Sophia couldn't finish the thought. "We need to go," Zoe said urgently, taking photos of the documents with her phone. "Before he comes back." As they gathered the evidence, Sophia noticed an appointment in James's open calendar for that very evening. VK, strategy discussion, 9 p.m. The current time was 8:45. They barely made it out of the building before James's car pulled into the private garage. From across the street, they watched as Victor Kingsley arrived minutes later, entering the building with the confident stride of someone who'd been there many times before. "We have to tell Alexander," Zoe said as they hurried away. "They've been plotting against both of you for years." Sophia nodded, clutching the folder of evidence they'd taken. Her mind was reeling from the betrayal, not just James's rejection at the altar, but the calculated deception that had preceded it. Every moment of their relationship had been a lie, part of a cold-blooded strategy to control her and protect Victor's position. But even as anger and hurt threatened to overwhelm her, Sophia felt a strange clarity emerging. She wasn't just Alexander Montgomery's long-lost daughter anymore. She was a woman who had been underestimated and manipulated, and now she would show James and Victor exactly how much they had misjudged her. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Alexander asked, his expression grave as he reviewed the evidence Sophia and Zoe had gathered. They were meeting in Alexander's New York penthouse, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Central Park. Eleanor stood nearby, her usually composed face tight with anger as she examined the photographs and emails. "I wish I wasn't," Sophia replied. "But it's all there in black and white. James has been working with Victor from the beginning. Our entire relationship was orchestrated to keep me from finding you." Alexander placed the documents carefully on his desk, his movements controlled but his eyes blazing with a cold fury. "And the wedding? The public rejection? I think that was unplanned," Sophia said. "Based on the messages we found, Victor wanted James to go through with the marriage, then use the post-nuptial agreement to control any inheritance I might receive. But something went wrong at the ceremony. Margaret Bennett," Zoe suggested, "James's mother. She never approved of Sophia, and from what we saw, she was pressuring him right up until the moment he was supposed to say his vows. He cracked under her influence, which ironically created the very situation they were trying to prevent," Eleanor noted. "If James had simply married Sophia as planned, you might never have appeared at the church, Alexander. They sabotaged their own scheme." Alexander nodded slowly. "And now they're scrambling to recover. Victor by threatening you and trying to force you to sign away your rights, James by suddenly wanting to elope." His expression darkened. "Did you find any evidence of what they planned after securing control of your inheritance?" Sophia hesitated. "There was a clause in the draft agreement about management of assets in case of my incapacitation or death, and James's real estate company is nearly bankrupt. He needs money desperately. The implications are disturbing, to say the least," Alexander said quietly. "What do we do now?" Sophia asked. "Go to the police?" Alexander exchanged looks with Eleanor. "The evidence is compelling, but much of it could be explained away in court as business connections rather than conspiracy. Victor is very careful. He would have insulated himself legally." "So they just get away with it?" Zoe asked incredulously. "No," Alexander said, his voice suddenly hard with determination. They most certainly do not get away with it, but we need to be strategic. He turned to Sophia. You mentioned James has proposed again and wants to elope? Sophia nodded. He's been pushing for a quick ceremony. Destination wedding. Just the two of us. And what if you counter-propose something else? Alexander suggested. A second wedding here in New York. Something elegant but intimate, with just close family and a few key business associates. Sophia caught his meaning immediately. Including you and Victor. Exactly, Alexander confirmed. A perfect opportunity to gather all the players in one place. You want me to pretend I'm taking James back? Sophia asked, uncertain. Just long enough to expose him. And Victor, in front of witnesses who matter, Alexander explained. The board members, key investors, legal counsel, people whose opinion could actually damage them, rather than a criminal case that might drag on for years with uncertain outcome. Sophia considered the proposal. The idea of pretending to reconcile with James was distasteful, but the prospect of publicly exposing his betrayal, of taking control of the narrative rather than remaining his victim, held undeniable appeal. It would need to be convincing, Eleanor cautioned. James and Victor would be suspicious of a sudden reconciliation. I can be convincing, Sophia said, her resolve hardening. They've underestimated me from the beginning. They think I'm just a kindergarten teacher who's in over her head. It's time to show them exactly how wrong they are. Over the following 2 weeks, Sophia executed her part of the plan with precision. She responded to James's increasingly desperate messages with carefully calibrated reluctance followed by tentative forgiveness. She allowed him to believe his charm was wearing down her defenses, that his persistence was being rewarded. I'm still hurt by what happened, she told him during a carefully staged, chance encounter at her favorite coffee shop. But maybe you're right about second chances. James seized the opening eagerly. Let me prove myself to you, Sophia. We can elope, start fresh without all the pressure and complications. Actually, she replied thoughtfully, I've been thinking about that. Eloping feels like hiding, like we're ashamed. If we're really going to start over, I want to do it properly, with the people who matter to us present. You mean, another wedding? James asked, barely concealing his alarm. Something small and elegant, Sophia assured him. Just close family and a few key friends, including my father, of course. James's expression shifted subtly at the mention of Alexander, a flicker of calculation behind his earnest facade. Of course, if that's what would make you happy. It would, Sophia confirmed, silently noting how quickly his desire for a private elopement disappeared once Alexander's attendance was promised. Meanwhile, Alexander prepared his side of the operation with the methodical thoroughness that had built his empire. Security personnel were briefed, legal documents prepared, and keyboard members discreetly informed of selected portions of what had been discovered. We need to be surgical about this, he told Sophia during one of their planning sessions. The goal isn't just to expose James and Victor, but to do it in a way that leaves no room for them to recover or retaliate. For her part, Eleanor coordinated the wedding arrangements with her typical efficiency, securing the rooftop garden of a prestigious Manhattan hotel and handling the countless details such an event required, all while maintaining the secrecy of their true intentions. The morning of the second wedding arrived bright, clear, a perfect spring day in New York City. As Sophia prepared in a suite at the hotel, Zoe helped her into a dress that was worlds away from her first ill-fated wedding gown. Where that had been modest and carefully budgeted, this was a designer creation of Alexander's choosing, elegant, sophisticated, and subtly conveying the Montgomery wealth and taste. How are you feeling? Zoe asked as she fastened the last button. Strangely calm, Sophia replied, studying her reflection. Like everything that happened, James's rejection, finding Alexander, discovering the plot, was leading to this moment. Poetic justice, Zoe nodded. Exposing them at a wedding, just like James humiliated you at a wedding. There was a soft knock at the door, and Alexander entered, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit. He stopped at the sight of Sophia, emotion briefly overwhelming his usual composure. You look beautiful, he said quietly. Thank you, Sophia replied, suddenly shy. For everything, the dress, this chance to set things right. You've done the hard part, Alexander assured her. Keeping up this pretense with James couldn't have been easy. Sophia smoothed her hands over the silk of her gown. Actually, it was easier than I expected. Once I saw the truth about him, it was like looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. The man I thought I loved never existed. Alexander offered his arm. Are you ready? She took a deep breath and nodded. Absolutely. The rooftop garden had been transformed into an elegant wedding venue, with white flowers and greenery creating an atmosphere of simple sophistication. Unlike Sophia's first wedding, this gathering was deliberately small, perhaps 50 guests in total, each carefully selected for their significance in either exposing or witnessing the coming revelation. James waited at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, his confident smile betraying no hint of his true intentions. In the front row sat his mother, Margaret Bennett, looking considerably more approving than she had at the first ceremony. Beside her was Victor Kingsley, his expression neutral but his eyes watchful. The small orchestra began playing, and the guests rose as Alexander escorted Sophia down the aisle. She could feel the weight of Victor's gaze as she approached, the silent calculation behind his polite smile. James extended his hand as they reached the altar, and Sophia allowed Alexander to place her hand in his one final deception before the truth was revealed. The minister began the ceremony, his words flowing smoothly until he reached the familiar phrase, "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." In the pause that followed, Sophia gently withdrew her hand from James's grip. "Actually," she said, her clear voice carrying across the rooftop, "before we proceed, I'd like to share something with everyone." James blinked in confusion. "Sophia, what?" "Security," Alexander said quietly, and immediately, several of his team moved into position, two beside Victor, one near James, others blocking the exits. Sophia turned to face the guests. "I want to thank you all for coming today, especially those of you who witnessed my humiliation at my first wedding, when James declared me too poor to marry. I'm sure you're wondering why I would give him a second chance." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. James reached for Sophia's arm. "Darling, this isn't the time. Actually, it's exactly the time," Sophia replied, stepping away from him. "You see, I've recently discovered that my entire relationship with James was a fraud, a calculated plan orchestrated by him and Victor Kingsley to prevent me from discovering my true identity as Alexander Montgomery's daughter." Victor rose to his feet. "This is absurd. Alexander, control your daughter's theatrics. I think we should hear what she has to say," Alexander replied calmly. At his signal, Eleanor activated a projection screen that had been disguised among the wedding decorations. On it appeared the first of many incriminating documents, emails between James and Victor discussing the target and their strategy. "For 3 years," Sophia continued, "James has been reporting on my activities to Victor, ensuring I remained unaware of my heritage. Their goal was to keep me separated from my father, and when that failed, to secure control of any inheritance I might receive." James's face had drained of color. "Sophia, these are obviously fabricated. Someone is trying to drive us apart. Like this document?" Sophia asked as Eleanor displayed the post-nuptial agreement on the screen. "The one giving you control over my assets in case of my incapacitation or death? Was that fabricated too, James?" Margaret Bennett rose shakily to her feet. "James, what is she talking about? What have you done?" But James was already moving, attempting to push past one of the security personnel toward the exit. "This is a private matter between Sophia and me. If you'll excuse me, I'm afraid we can't let you leave just yet," Alexander said, nodding to his security team, who firmly blocked James's path. "Not when there's so much more to discuss, like the embezzlement Victor has been conducting from Montgomery Enterprises for the past 5 years." This accusation sent a fresh shock through the assembled guests. Victor's face contorted with rage. "You have no proof of that." "Actually, we do," Eleanor replied, advancing the slideshow to display financial records. "Once we began investigating your connection to James, we discovered irregularities in several offshore accounts linked to shell companies under your control. The forensic accounting team has prepared a comprehensive report for the board." Several of the board members present exchanged alarmed glances. The company's chief legal counsel was already reviewing the documents with intense concentration. Victor's composure shattered. "This is a setup. Alexander, you've orchestrated this whole charade because you can't accept that your long-lost daughter isn't qualified to run your company. I've given you 15 years of my life, and I've compensated you generously for your service," Alexander replied evenly. "But conspiring to manipulate my daughter, planning to control her inheritance through coercion, potentially even endangering her life, these aren't actions I can forgive or forget." James, seeing his position growing increasingly untenable, changed tactics. "Sophia," he pleaded, "whatever you think you've found has been misinterpreted. I love you. I've always loved you. Victor may have approached me years ago, yes, but my feelings for you are real. Were they real when you called me too poor at the altar?" Sophia asked quietly. "Or did they only become real when you discovered who my father was?" "You don't understand the pressure I was under," James insisted. "My company was struggling. My mother had expectations." "You're right about one thing," Sophia interrupted. "I don't understand betraying someone I claim to love. I don't understand plotting to control their inheritance. And I certainly don't understand the kind of person who would value wealth over human decency." The guests were now openly murmuring, many recording the confrontation on their phones. Among them were several influential business journalists Alexander had specifically invited, ensuring the story would spread quickly through the right channels. Victor, seeing his carefully constructed future crumbling, made one last desperate attempt. "The board won't stand for this," he shouted. "I've been groomed as successor for a decade. Montgomery Enterprises needs experienced leadership, not a kindergarten teacher playing at business." "Actually," the chief legal counsel interjected, "the board serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder, which is Alexander. And as for succession, he's well within his rights to designate his daughter as his heir, regardless of her business experience. She could appoint experienced executives to run daily operations while maintaining ownership control." As security personnel began escorting Victor and James from the rooftop, James turned back to Sophia with a sneer. "You really were too poor," he snarled. "Too poor in spirit to see what we could have built together. You're just like your father, choosing pride over power." Sophia watched them go, feeling not triumph but a quiet resolve. "You're wrong," she called after him. "I chose integrity over deception, and that's a kind of wealth you'll never understand." After they were gone, Alexander addressed the remaining guests. "I apologize for the unorthodox nature of this gathering. While it wasn't the wedding you expected to witness, I hope you understand the necessity of addressing these matters openly. Please join us for the reception that's been prepared. This may not be a wedding celebration, but it is certainly a day worth commemorating." As the guests moved toward the reception area, many stopping to express support or sympathy to Sophia, she found herself standing alone by the altar that had been meant for her second sham marriage. The irony wasn't lost on her. Twice she had approached this threshold, and twice the ceremony had been derailed, but this time she had been in control. Alexander approached, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" Sophia smiled, surprised to find tears in her eyes despite her composure. "Yes, it's just a lot to process. 6 weeks ago, I was a kindergarten teacher excited about marrying the man I loved. Now I've discovered my father, exposed a conspiracy, and publicly humiliated 2 men who tried to manipulate me. It's a lot of change to absorb." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "Life rarely follows the path we expect. The question is what you want to do next." "That's the strange part," Sophia replied. "For the first time in weeks, I actually feel like I know." 6 months later, Sophia stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Montgomery Foundation headquarters, addressing the gathered crowd at the launch of her education initiative. The foundation, her foundation, would provide scholarships, resources, and support to underserved communities, with a special focus on early childhood education. "Some people measure wealth by bank accounts and possessions," she told the audience, "but true wealth lies in our connections, our compassion, and our ability to make a difference in others' lives." In the front row, Alexander sat watching his daughter with unmistakable pride. His health had stabilized under a new treatment protocol developed by leading researchers, funded, of course, by the Montgomery fortune. While his condition remained serious, the doctors were now cautiously optimistic about his extended prognosis. After the presentation, as guests mingled and celebrated the foundation's launch, Sophia spotted a familiar face among the catering staff. James, notably less polished than she remembered, serving champagne with a forced smile. Their eyes met briefly across the room. He quickly looked away, the public disgrace of his exposed schemes having permanently damaged his once promising career. Victor had faced more serious consequences. The evidence of embezzlement had been irrefutable, leading to criminal charges and civil lawsuits from Montgomery Enterprises. Last Sophia had heard, he was awaiting trial, his carefully constructed reputation in tatters. "Quite a turnaround, isn't it?" Zoe commented, appearing at Sophia's side and nodding toward James. "From calling you too poor to serving drinks at your foundation launch. Life has a way of balancing the scales," Sophia agreed, "though I take no pleasure in his downfall, just in the knowledge that he can't hurt anyone else the way he tried to hurt me." Later that evening, Sophia drove to her mother's modest suburban home, where Ellen and Robert were hosting a small family dinner to celebrate the foundation's successful launch. Alexander had been invited as well, a development that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. As Sophia entered the familiar living room, she found her mother and father sitting together on the sofa, looking at old photo albums. Ellen sharing the childhood memories Alexander had missed, both of them laughing over Sophia's gap-toothed elementary school pictures. "There she is," Ellen called when she noticed Sophia. "The woman of the hour." "Hardly," Sophia laughed, accepting her mother's hug. "I just gave a speech. The real work is just beginning. Don't diminish what you've accomplished," Alexander admonished gently. "Creating a foundation that merges your passion for education with the resources to make a significant impact, that's no small achievement." As they gathered around the dinner table, a scene that would have seemed impossible just months ago, Sophia felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Despite the betrayal and pain she had endured, she wouldn't change the path that had led her here, to this moment of authentic connection with both her parents. "I proposed a toast," Robert said, raising his glass. to new beginnings, long overdue reunions, and the family we choose to build despite life's obstacles. To family, they echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light of the dining room. Later, as Sophia helped her mother with the dishes while Alexander and Robert discussed baseball in the living room, Ellen nudged her daughter gently. "Are you happy, sweetheart? Really happy?" she asked. "So much has changed in your life." Sophia paused, considering the question seriously. "I am," she replied truthfully. "Not in the way I expected to be 6 months ago, but in a deeper way, I think. I know who I am now, not just as Alexander Montgomery's daughter or James's ex-fiancée, but as myself, Sophia Parker, a kindergarten teacher who happens to run a foundation, a woman who knows her own worth can't be measured by anyone else's standards." Ellen squeezed her daughter's hand. "That's the greatest wealth of all," she said softly, "and it's something no one can ever take from you." Through the doorway, Sophia could see Alexander laughing at something Robert had said. Two men from entirely different worlds finding common ground in their care for the same family. She thought about the journey that had brought them all to this point, the humiliation that had revealed her true heritage, the betrayal that had ultimately freed her from a life built on lies, the confrontation that had allowed her to reclaim her narrative. "You're too poor," James had said at that first wedding. How wrong he had been. Sophia Parker had never been poor in the ways that truly mattered. In courage, in integrity, in the capacity to forge genuine connections. And now, surrounded by her reconstructed family, not perfect, still healing, but authentic in every way that counted, she knew without doubt that she was wealthy beyond measure. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time.